Welcome everyone. We'll get more officers and councillors. I'm sure we'll cover quite a lot. I'll cover the sort of rule parameters really. Welcome councillors and members of the public. Reminder, please switch off your mobiles. To silent off on silent. Fire evacuation procedure. We're not expecting any fire alarms today. So if a fire alarm does sound, required to leave the building immediately on the direction of the officer present. I think the car park is our
Correct, Chair.
designation.
That's for the car park.
Thank you. Item 17, reminiscence of the public and press. Please note that a few minutes are required to enable the public to join the meeting. Item 18. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Not sure what I'm saying there, but you know.
I think it's
Oh, well, me. I thought that was. That's what we're. Thank you. So. Questions?
We've got apologies from councillors Orange, Quinn, Walker and Whitehead.
Thank you very much. To prove correct the record of the minutes of the meeting held on 13th of April 2023. Pages 17 to 18 of the agenda. Any comments, or can I ask for a mover? Oh, who's first?
That's the thing.
Harry. And a seconder, please. Mr. Councillor Jones, thank you. And all in favour? And one absence. Okay, absolutely, thank you. Right, items brought forward in which the opinion of the chair should be considered the meeting. I've got nothing. Why? I think nothing else you've got for me, no, Judy? Declarations of interest.
I've received none, Chair.
No, and I think I did discuss with Kate, sort of, we're discussing captain training and lack of attendance later on. But we don't think there's an issue with those present. Yeah, nothing. No major issue with those present. Okay. And can we agree on the agenda view part A and part B? We just need a mover and seconder, is that right? A mover, thank you. Thanks for Harold Booth, thank you, and seconder. Thank you. Right, part A. That's agenda item 6. Oh, part B 6, so I'll get on the page. Thank you. Right, are we? Yes, please, thank you.
So just for you, the don't know, we mostly do. My name's Tracy Blackmore. I'm the service manager for development management. So I sort of deal with all the aspects of the sort of the planning application, planning renewals, anything field side. I don't do the planning policy side. I deal with all the reactive sort of planning applications. So my brief, I think today was, or this evening, was to keep members informed on the average determination times of applications in my service, but without extensions of time. So I've just gone through a little bit in the report, which I'm sure you've read, in terms of planning applications are validated, then the sort of clock starts in terms of that statutory time limit, and the actual statutory time limits for planning applications, which is under the Town and Country Planning Order. So for a minor application, it's 8 weeks. A major application will be 13 weeks, and 16 weeks when there's EIA development. And also where it says has a little bit of a, so 2010, the government in the Town and Country, Article 29 of the Town and Country Planning Act allowed for something called the extensions of time. So it's where there was a legitimate reason why an application had to be extended to allow for that. And in the majority of cases, it will be for additional information or for amended plans or for major applications, which generally when a Section 106 legal agreements required, which is obviously a lot more timely in terms of that legal agreement. So I think you just asked for the average determined Q1, 23-24, April to June. So just having a quick look, so the major applications, say there was 8 applications, the average time was 49.5 weeks. And we determined 2 applications within the 16-week period. And the minor applications was the average was 16.1 weeks. And the determination within 8 weeks was 52 applications. So with an extension of time, I haven't put that there because you didn't necessarily ask for that, but with an extension of time, that quarter, the minor applications, 94% was determined within that time period, and 89% of major applications with an extension of time determined in that time period. So it does show a picture. It also, I think I was here probably about 6 months ago in terms of telling you what the importance of extension of time and the central government do allow for that, and there are good reasons to allow for that. And I think I gave tried to give that reassurance before in terms of we wouldn't ask for an extension of time unless we generally felt there was a requirement for that, and that generally is good placemaking in terms of ensuring that the planning application can either be tweaked or amended to ensure that it is either in accordance with policy or the design is better. If the principle is not acceptable, we would normally get a decision out within that time period, because it just wouldn't be acceptable even with those amendments. So I'm sure there's lots of questions. So I would sort of leave it to you guys in terms of, I'm sure there's quite a few questions in terms of EOTs and determination times and planning application.
Can I ask a question before I open up to
Yeah.
colleagues? Could you by definition of what a major development is? Is it
Yeah.
simple, in fact, simple?
That's fine. So the criteria for major applications,
Yes.
anything above 10 residential units. They work on a residential development on a site of over 0.5 hectares.
Yep.
And non-residential on 1 hectare, or the creation or change of use over 1,000 square metres.
Yours is only staff. And again, it's very not a simple answer, but what are the implications of us not achieving these targets?
Yeah, so I think it's really important that the central government, as I said to you before, allow for extensions of time.
Yes.
So they are really clear, and that is in the Town and Country Planning Act in terms of that is a legitimate extension of times. Not everyone got for extensions of time, but we are, those KPI figures to the central government include extensions of time. If so in terms of there's 2 targets really in terms of planning authority going into special measures. One of them would be that the application numbers in terms of termination period would be below 80% for minors and 60% for majors. And ours are very much normally on 90 and 80%. And equally, if our planning appeals record was a percentage being more allowed than dismissed. So that's the 2 sort of, so when local authorities go into special measures, that will be the two sort of qualifications that central government would have a look at. And that would then mean that the planning inspectorate would handle all our planning applications and our pre-acts and everything. So that's not what we want, and I don't think that's anywhere where we are. But I think it's always a good reminder for all my officers to understand that if we weren't performing, there are we could be put in special measures, and that will take all our local powers away from us.
In the future, soon going to ask for future reports and some sort of that. Can we put into an indicator that shows that's where we are away from national figure? Is something?
So there is national applications in terms of where 8 weeks and 12 weeks are in the rest of England. In terms of other authorities, that's something I can bring back and share with you.
You think there is comparable council? What about these? That's
Yeah. So I've had the figures for the last 2 years for the whole of South West, and we are, actually we're probably one of the top ones. So the last 2 years we're 93%. So Torridge is 92%. A lot of the other sort of Cornwall, Torbay, Dorset are sort of high 80s.
Wow.
So we always kind of sit kind of 80, 90% in terms of those determination periods.
Oh no, that's a budget.
Yeah, I was interested more in the data for applications where there were agreed extensions.
Yeah.
Because I understand there have been cases where an application has been received It had full pre-planning application in there. At the point when you'd expect a 3 months point, you'd expect a decision to be made. They then asked for further drawings,
Okay,
which I would have thought that it shouldn't be accepted if you don't have all of the drawings.
yeah,
And also that the applicants have been pressured rather harder than I would have thought by rather you have to give an extension
Mhm.
before we can give you a determination, which doesn't feel very fair. So I wondered, you know, what percentage of applications have agreed extensions? And how many of those due to, I would guess, under-resourcing to
yeah.
miss
So I
things
would
like
say
that?
probably half of applications had approximately agreed extension in time. I think there's two schools of thought, isn't there? So in some councils, particularly if pre-application advice has been provided by an officer and that's been ignored. If an application came in and that pre-application advice was ignored, some councils would just go, we've given them pre-app advice, they clearly haven't listened to us. We'll just refuse the application within our end period. So there is that school of thought, and lots of the planning authorities do that. Or there is perhaps more of a customer focus approach in terms of actually if the principle is acceptable, okay, maybe they haven't listened to us, but do we give it another bite of the cherry in terms of actually it's still quite big, we need to reduce it, we need to actually scale it back, we need to have it closer to the build form. And so I think the second approach is probably what we've taken, and I know a lot of our agency staff come in and actually struggle sometimes with that going, well, you've given them pre-app advice and they just claim it ignored you.
But what happens if you followed the pre-app advice
Yeah.
perfectly?
So the problem with pre-application advice is it's very good and I would always support it, but unfortunately, no statutory quantities are actually consulted. So the parish council would have been consulted, the highway authority would be consulted, and actually although it's somebody planning officer's advice, it's not a real life planning application. We've not consulted the neighbours, we've not known actually there's an issue with Mrs Jones next door, who feels it's too close to her property, so we need to go out and assess that. So the pre-app is great and it works, but it won't work 100% of the time because it isn't a live application that we have all the statutory quantities, we have all the neighbours to really understand. And that's kind of what we put a little bit disclaimer. This isn't, we've not consulted anyone. This is just a planning officer's advice in terms of if we feel the principle is acceptable or not. And there always will be those exceptions. There will be things where we saw pre-app advice that came in and it got approved and it, perfect. There'll always be those occasions where actually that didn't work, for whatever reason in terms of the highway authority, if actually they're not happy with the visibility on the applicant. There will always be those when unfortunately it just something has come up in the live application.
Wonder if Jeremy might like to chip in on that, because I think we've had conversations, haven't we, about the things that I've learned, and I'm not sure that those necessarily fit with the explanation that you've given there, although the explanation is very good on the whole.
I think we can have confidence that Tracy's team works in the interests of our customer and at its heart seeks to deliver good development. So we can be challenged around timescales. But the most important process here is the function of shaping place.
Yeah.
And the quality of the output from the service, I think, is the principal issue of concern. And I think that would be the principal issue of concern for our community. So while it is right, and you can have absolute confidence that Tracy manages the performance of her team, but the team does not lose sight over its principal objective, and that is securing good development. So while I understand your desire to scrutinise hard data, there's something a little bit more subjective here about the corporate responsibility we have to shape North Devon moving forward, and that's a balance. We can't produce a number to evidence that, but as I say, we've had extensive conversations regarding this issue, and you can have absolute confidence, say, in the focus of the service on the customer, and also the focus on ensuring that North Devon is the place we want it to be moving forward.
I would also like to thank the team on the record. There was an application in South Molton outside the development brief that the people of the town were up in arms. And I think sometimes you've got to be a bit brave, haven't you, in planning? But I understand that you have sided with the people and with the local council and stopped that development. It wasn't a very unsuitable site, but with the negatives, there are also some positives in it.
That was the result of our St Andrews Road inquiry, which confirmed we had 5 years landslide, so that's great in terms of planning development. That one was outside the development boundary, so as soon as we had that appeal, we reduced the application.
We quite often we get feedback from residents who are upset, but there was also a lot of good work, and I'm glad that you're looking at things and not rushing them through for the sake of it. But I think the ask for extensions on, you know, the householder when they want a small extension, from our interactions, perhaps those could be dealt with slightly differently.
Certainly agree, you know, all my planning officers should be dealing with stuff in a timely manner. You know, we shouldn't be delaying for no reason. So 100% some of those minor applications where the extension comes in and actually there's no amendments, yeah, we should be getting that amendment. You know, there's no argument about that. I don't agree with that.
I think things are going in the right direction for the department. Obviously, with the resources you have, you can't move quickly. You have to catch up on the things that have got behind as well, which isn't great. And I'm sure Tom's going to back you on that.
Absolutely. I think also, just to add, what we're showing here is being open and transparent with the data of time, whereas previous performance data we reported on has been those very high percentages, 90% we're talking about, where those extension of times have been given, which is great results, and obviously compared to other councils, we are one of the top runners there, which is positive. But sat behind that is obviously it's important we look at the average time it does take for the applications, and that's where work can then go on to see actually how can we try and reduce that to be as efficient as possible. It's that balance with resources that you've got available, and hopefully discussions we have later about staffing an agency hopefully go to improve that position further going forward.
And then we have very demanding appeal process.
Yeah, time hungry, yeah.
It's not, you know, I think people don't generally mind their household and putting a small extension on so they can live in their house, but they do tend to have feelings towards the larger developments. So perhaps we could streamline things,
Yeah.
you know, because we want people to be able to stay in their houses, especially as they're going up in values and they can't afford to move house.
Our recruitment, you know, we've recently taken on some planning apprentices who are doing these minor applications and also doing their university course at the same time, which is fantastic. So we are getting more sort of younger members of the teams, especially planning. You know, you can do those minor applications. Actually, it's generally sort of more the experienced planners we actually are struggling to get hold of, because unfortunately they are going to the private sector where they pay a lot more money, as we'll see in terms of, you know, the agency staff, what they're on.
Time as the economy changes, that
Yeah.
comes back into our favour.
But I think this will be covered in the next.
Yeah, sorry.
That's fine. So you hope that John or two days. Can I pass on to Councillor Jones?
Yeah,
Councillor, thank you.
And just firstly, just a big thank you, because as a new councillor, you've been incredibly supportive, and the whole team has. And there's times, there's moments when we're sort of up at arms with planning. You've had a particularly challenging situation with the 5-year land supply, and I know definitely in my ward, there's a lot of frustration around that, and developments that might not have gone through that have now gone through. So yeah, just a big thank you to everyone, and it's clear that you are all trying to do the best you can. And my understanding is one of the challenges at the moment is that less experienced workforce. And we obviously had a situation last week where we had an applicant that had gone through a process for something not entirely simple, but something that was relatively clear and obvious. And unfortunately, they got through, I think, 2 extensions. And then at the end of that process, and it's just one of those things, not blaming, but it's basically down to inexperience of the officer, that when it got to the end of that process, it basically became apparent that applicant needed to change significantly, kind of at what the applicant saw as the last minute. Now, these kind of mistakes happen, and we're understanding of the resource and situation you're in, but I'm just intrigued to know how common that kind of situation is.
Yeah, so I don't think that happens very often. I think that is, that was an extreme example. I think there is training that needs to be taken on. It's really hard, isn't it? We've got a lot of sort of more or less experienced staff, and actually by them doing things, they have to learn. But it's also making sure they're supported really well in terms of making sure that they are having regular one-to-ones.
Yeah.
And they're talking through applications with myself and the lead officers to ensure that they are on the right steer. So I think if anything came with that, I think with that officer, I would ensure that she's having more one-to-ones with those lead officers to really ensure that it doesn't get to the end point where actually we're not happy with it. It's much more upfront for her as well. So yeah, no, absolutely take everything there before I'm sending.
Could I add in there? Because if the applicant doesn't want to give an extension, it gets to the point where it's 6 months in and the non-determination allows them to get the planning permission
They get the planning feedback.
and they get the
Yeah,
feedback. So
absolutely, yeah.
But they actually get that, they get planning.
you get the
So
planning permission.
the 26-week period is really key for us. So if it's gone over 26 weeks and the extension time hasn't been agreed, then essentially they can ask for their feedback. And also they could also have their planning permission granted as well if it's acceptable. So that 26-week key is actually potentially more important in some ways than the 8, 13 and 16 weeks, because obviously the fee gets returned. So there's no fee for the local authority, and essentially we also have to give them planning permission as well. So that the 26-week is also really key.
It's difficult for councillors because people will say, do I give this extension? And
I think.
I'm sure we should say yes, but
I
actually,
think there's a legitimate reason that actually there's going to be a betterment that we are asking purely for something. In fact, it's really hard, so without examples, it's really difficult, isn't it? But on the whole, if the principle wasn't acceptable, I would hope that my officers would make the application, would probably refuse the application within that 8 or 12, 16 week. If the application is acceptable, then I think to be customer focused and to make good development, as Jeremy advised, then in my eyes, it's right to ask for those improvements for the community and ensuring that built environment is the best quality we can make it. There are other things as well, there are things like statutory property that I have a 21-day period, but they don't always get back to us. So there are other issues, or agents don't get back to us, applicants don't get back to us. There are lots of other things that kind of are in the mix of it. But I would say to your constituency, if they're asking you and saying, actually, should I provide an EAT, if they can see a betterment and that they can understand actually there's a clear rationale why I'm giving an extension of time or a week to get an amended scheme, then I would agree. But if there isn't, then I would say probably comes to me, because I need to know if they're not genuine reasons for extension of time being granted.
Last week's example was a very good example.
We're getting to a lot of
Yeah, so
detail here now, and I
Yeah.
think sort of.
I think it's important there because the case study which I would have highlighted from probably 12 months ago seems to be being echoed with Councillor Jones's. So we haven't got past this. Perhaps the officer has lots of work. We know they've got lots of work and they do work hard. Suddenly they think, oh no, I've nearly run out of time here and I haven't had a chance to look through this application properly. And maybe that's why some of
That's what I was, forgive me, Claire, what I was trying to add in this example was that it was a mistake.
Yeah,
It was dealt with.
Yeah.
We went back to them
Yeah.
and they were relieved by the situation and calmed down. So, yeah, thank you.
I think we can trust that.
Yeah.
My service manager will take it forward when necessary.
I want to just shift the focus slightly to enforcement and the timescales involved.
Yeah.
Can you just say, I know you're short staffed.
yeah. So, I mean, enforcement is a sort of more non-statutory regulatory service, so there is no necessarily sort of government targets for that. We do understand that enforcement is part of DM and it's very important to have confidence in enforcement to ensure that we have a good development management team. And we have recently put measures in place to ensure we now have a staff within our enforcement team. So within the next couple of weeks, you should see some real benefits of that.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for your support
So,
and your time. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And it's just to note this report. So we're going to development. So item number 7. Yes. Right. An interesting one. And I think there's been some amendments to the report.
That's right. So thank you, Chair. Yeah, well, just to cover what this is about. This is about councillors' attendance at member training. So back on the 11th of January 2023, the previous council councillors agreed the member training and development plan. So it was a programme which included various items of training which were marked as mandatory. And then Article 2.3 of the Constitution provides as a key function of councillors to participate in training and development opportunities offered by the council, and it's a requirement of certain of our committees that councillors are undertake such training. So, and obviously there is a risk, obviously, to the council if councillors are making decisions having not attended certain training. So in terms of the amendments, I mean, the first ones are actually quite positive, really, because it's at 4.3.1, the numbers that I've got there. So it previously said, so this is for the Port Marine safety training, there were 10, now it's down to 6. At 4.3.2, it was 5, now down to 2. That's for local plan training. At 4.3.3, that was 8, is now 5 for the finance training. At 4.3.4, 8 is now down to 4 for local publicity. 4.3.5, that was 12, now down to 6 for equality training. And 4.3.6 was 20, now 5 for the health and safety training. So obviously there's been an improvement, but obviously any that are outstanding is obviously too many, really. The other change I'd like to make is to the recommendation, really. So I was going to recommend that we took out the recommendation 2.2, which is that a report with specific names taken to the next council, mainly because that would require us to publish that tomorrow to fit for the agenda. But actually that instead it would be more practical to actually put in place a sort of recommended sanction that's applied generally henceforth for this kind of thing. So my plan was to recommend to you that we amend 2.1 to say recommend to full council that to underline the importance associated with training highlighted as mandatory in the member training and development programme as set by full council, a sanction shall be imposed by the monitoring officer and/or governance committee for any councillors who have not completed such training to be suspended from relevant committees pertinent to such training pending completion of that training. So that's the recommended change. So from here on in, we'll have a precedent that can be used. Technically, this committee has delegated powers to put in place sanctions, but it seems appropriate that it's recommended to full council, mainly because full council set that training programme, and it will sort of push it home how important the training programme is. So that's the report. Okay.
I think it's much better than naming names. Much better. Highly approve of it.
Sorry, approval of naming names.
It's much better than naming names. This is a general rule rather than naming specific names.
Yeah.
And I think it's far better.
I was wondering, Simon, is there a correlation between non-attendees or watching the videos of the training, because obviously not everyone can get to a daytime training, so it might be that they need to watch the video and do it that way. The people who have not done the training and the people who have a poor attendance record at those committees or at full council. It's just an interest. It's whether the people are less interested in actually being councillors, and that might be. I don't know what the data says, but I'd be interested to see if there is a correlation between those two.
Who might usually go on to council?
Similar question.
Let's take the questions first.
Yeah, fine, yeah.
Yeah, that's easy.
Okay.
Councillor Jones.
It's on the same point. And I know, without being too political, it's a constant point brought up by us independents, along with the Greens, on the basis that you would almost think with the majority sometimes, because we tend to be represented well at meetings. My only concern is with the point you're raising, if they are struck off of attending those councils, will it still be recorded that they should be attending that meeting? Because at the moment, it's obviously recorded that councillors' attendance records. So if they are if they haven't done the training and they haven't attended meetings, but they are supposed to have done both, would it then be the case that it wouldn't be recorded that they should be at the meeting?
It's a good point.
And Councillor Stevens.
I just think it's important to know, I find it quite difficult to attend as much as possible, full-time work, and it's quite a demanding job. I've just found out my car's struggling to get up the hill to this particular site. So I think it's just important to remember that it's not necessarily that people aren't interested in being councillors, it's the work. And I understand that we all need to balance it as well as we can, but I know someone who also has really struggled to attend some of these meetings because he's a dad of 2 young children. He works in the NHS, and it's just these things that we need to consider that.
Thank you.
I'm a dad of 2 young children. I have a really
We can discuss it, but I just think.
The point I'm making is we won't be going on Easter on a holiday this autumn because I've used my holiday for training.
Wait, yeah.
I think when people,
We can go back and forth all day on
the
that.
point is when people took on the responsibility, they knew the same responsibility in terms of training. Yeah.
I think made a point. You have to think about a response.
Well, yeah, so in terms of correlation, I mean, I've really got that data, unfortunately, but I mean, I've mainly got sort of just who hasn't gone and the kind of chasing that occurred and sort of what was done, you know, that they all took place sort of in May, sort of late May, June, July, some early August, and then since then, I believe that there's the option to watch recordings online, so that can be done in you know the councillor's own time. Yeah, so I can't confirm whether there's any kind of correlation with attendance at committee, but I mean there are some names I recognise who I have seen at committee. So I mean, so yes, I mean I don't think that there is necessarily that.
Mr. Chair, may I ask that be brought back and the names be brought back to our next governance meeting? Because if we don't want to name them for full council, I understand that, but I think the members here need to understand the situation, whether there are correlations or extraneous situations. I noticed that, you know, the independent group are very supportive. So if your car is not working, you know, I can phone Peter up and he'll go, yeah, don't worry, I'll go out of my way to pick you up to go to large policy meetings, isn't it? The smaller meetings.
Yeah.
So it might be that there isn't the same support network in other groups.
Okay.
But I think we need to have that data to come
Let's-
back
let's
so
hold
we can
that.
find
Okay,
a way
I'll take
forward.
a second. Got comment? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's just to reassure members that we do publish data on members' attendance records each year. So that will be available. But where there are any issues in relation to any concerns about members' attendance, and this should really correctly be raised through the group leaders, because it's for the group leaders to then approach their own individual councillors and encourage them to attend. I'm not sure what would be achieved by bringing a report back with names attached to it showing attendance records and correlating that with the training record. They're 2 separate issues, but issues of equal concern, I'd suggest. But as I said, attendance issues I think should be raised through the group leaders. I think it's perfectly right that full council should be interested in those councillors that haven't attended the mandatory training because they've said it's mandatory. So it's perfectly right that they should be interested in those that have and haven't attended. But the attendance record, I think, is a matter for group leaders.
Thank you.
Sorry, if I may just elaborate on this. You understand that my training is in psychology, and that's why I want to see whether there are correlations. If we can understand the individuals and when there are correlations, then we can find a way forwards for the situation, because I think that we might find that there is a correlation.
Can I also catch to come through me before they speak, if that's right? I want to make sure you want to say. What's reassuring is things are improving, and that's probably over the weekend. I think the leaders were group 17, and the attendance of training is across all parties, not just one in particular. I'm reassured of that.
Oh, it wasn't about, I wasn't being party political, I'm not about individuals and whether there's a reason that they're struggling to do the training and or the meetings. And then if they've signed up to a committee, and we've got a number of people not here today, some of those that I don't actually recognise the name from attendance to governance. If those happen to be the people who haven't been getting the training, then we do have something that we need to work towards to facilitate them getting the training and facilitate them coming to the meetings as well.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's just to obviously follow up on the point the Chief Executive made. So the last Policy Development Committee, as being pointed out by councillors here, there was non-attendance by certain members. So through the chair has formally written to the group leaders about their concerns about attendance, not just at that meeting, but also previous policy development meetings. So I would suggest if various committees, if they have concerns, as the Chief Executive, maybe through you as chair, then that can be raised through the group leaders formally, and then the group leaders can take that up with their parties appropriately.
Yeah. But isn't it our job to try and find a solution and look at data and then try and find a way forward? So I think it's part of governance that we are to look at and see if there are correlations, if that's been flagged up by members.
Yeah, can I ask you to come to the chair? Councillor Jones.
Just clarification on that question. Just about if these people no longer need to are no longer need to attend because they haven't completed the training, how will their attendance record be marked? Would it still be expected that they should have attended those meetings, or would it be marked that they don't need to attend those meetings? I'd like clarification.
No, I think so. That's an important point. And important point is perhaps what are they being suspended from, because all meetings, and what is relevant. I think
are they being suspended from that responsibility to attend?
Yeah.
That's I think the question. Yeah.
I mean, example would be sort of Harbour Board. So you've not done the Harbour training, right? The associations.
Yeah.
Have you thought around sort of association or training to a certain committee? Or?
Yeah. Well, yes. I mean, obviously, like the recommendation says, it would be the committees that are pertinent to the. I mean, obviously, when you get sort of the equality, that makes it a bit more difficult as to which one. But in all likelihood, it would either be, I would probably bring a report back. Sort of if I mean, I'm hopeful that just this going will be sufficient that we don't have to worry about it anymore. But in the event that we do, I mean, it would probably be needed to bring a report back here really to go through who to apply to and to recommend which committees they should be temporarily suspended from. But I mean, in terms of whether they need to be marked out, I mean, I would assume that I don't know that off the top of my head, I'm afraid, but I'm going to check that. But unless anyone else knows, but I mean, I would have thought that if they're suspended, they for a short period, they presumably wouldn't appear. Perhaps Ken knows. He's put his hand up there.
Yeah, I think if they were suspended by full council from a committee, then when they didn't appear at that committee, that would be marked as non-attendance. But what might happen is that the group leader, because it's the group leader that puts forward councillors to sit on each committee, what might happen is that the group leader swaps that councillor out, for instance, and replaces them with somebody that can attend the meetings. So there's a number of different scenarios, but to answer the question, I think if they were suspended, then they would be marked as not in attendance on future meetings.
Thank you.
Mitchell.
I wonder, using nudge theory, whether councillors are being made aware of their suspension, that on the attendance record, it says whether you attended, whether you gave your apologies. Maybe there could be a column for those members who were suspended, so it shows how many meetings they were suspended for. I mean, there's grave concern around 4.3.6. From my understanding, health and safety is the responsibility of the executive officers or the line managers, and in the commercial sector, it would also be the directors of the company. And it looks very much like we've got almost half of the councillors who haven't turned up to the health and safety training. Now, surely that should be a red flag on our risk register that 20 out of the 42 councillors aren't fit to do their duty of upholding health and safety, especially with the changes for mental health becoming part of health and safety. These things are moving, and you can't say, oh, well, I did one 3 years ago, because the whole mental health thing around the HSE wasn't being pushed quite so hard.
Yeah, can I just refer, that's the one training that I don't think the dates were originally in the original plan. I'm not, not getting spacious like that.
It's in front of
Yeah,
us.
no, this was, but I first of all, health safety is across the board from officers, staff, councillors, everyone. Last question.
Yes, just on, so is the proposal, so clearly, if there's a particular committee, and you haven't done the training for, you can't attend that committee. So that general training, if you haven't done the general training, I believe was Harbour Committee is for everyone, because we're all the duty holders of the harbour, and I found it very interesting. So surely, if you haven't done the general training, you also aren't allowed to attend full council. Would be appropriate question, I
From
think.
what I particularly our launch officers sort of, we're not quite, perhaps I quite not, I haven't got meat on the bone yet. We need to clarify the consequences.
Yeah, that's
in the future report.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, yeah, we're currently sort of just proposing a sort of general sanction that we can apply. I mean, I'm not sure. Yeah, we would necessarily apply the sanction to full council, but it would probably be more around the committees that, I'm not sure if we even.
Why?
I think that's a question. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Simon's, sorry, am I allowed to press you with your crystal name? I struggle.
Yeah.
Officer Fuller, has asked if we can change the wording of 2.2. I think that we should change the wording of 2.2 to any councillor who hasn't done mandatory training will be suspended following a conversation with their group leader, and that suspension will be noted in any absences on the attendance register as a suspension. I think that gives the nudge to possibly get people to watch the videos, catch up on their training, and we can all go back to work, because attendance is poor across the board, not just for the training of certain individuals. But that would be allowed to change the wording, so we can put that in, rather than having all the councillors named at council, that they are warned at council, they will be suspended if they don't do it. That will be recorded against their attendance register as a suspension for any meetings they missed while being suspended. And I do believe if they haven't done the general training, then equally they shouldn't come to full council. That was a very hot day, I remember, for the Harbour Board training, when I was sat in the car at work because the internet wasn't working in the building.
I think
I learned a lot of things that there's absolutely no way I would have learned if I wasn't in that training. I mean, it opened my eyes to the entire world of running pilot boats and all sorts. So I don't think somebody could educate themselves on their own about that training. There's no way you would get that grounding unless you were a port authority yourself, as we all are. So
I think it's a different one. I think sort of, I'm not sure needs to go away and perhaps
Can I second that motion?
formulate.
Was that?
We've got the other thing.
I made a proposal, it's been seconded.
Oh, did you, sorry?
Yeah, that was my proposal.
Okay,
That councillors be told at the next meeting they will be suspended if they don't fulfil their training needs. And that the suspension for any meetings that they would miss will be recorded as a suspension on the attendance register. I think that's very fair. It doesn't involve anyone being named at this point, and it would give them a small amount of time to contact member services and get all the links so they can bring themselves up to speed on the training. I think that's fair. It's not identifying anyone at this point, and we see how that one works.
I think Zach and then Councillor Moore.
Can I just,
Yeah.
I can totally understand the sentiments behind that, Councillor Bushill. But can I just ask you to add to your motion something along the lines of subject to officers checking that that's actually possible? Because I don't have, unless Simon's got the information in front of him, I don't have the information in front of me. But some years ago, an awful lot of the powers to suspend a councillor were withdrawn by central government. And whilst it's quite clear that full council does have the power to suspend a councillor from a committee, I'm not sure whether full council has the power to suspend a councillor from full council. So that's something we would need to look at. But if you're happy to include that within the motion, we can go away and look at that afterwards, if you like.
If my second is happy to take that on board,
Can we share from Councillor?
I just wanted to just deal with this, that so long as the wording of my proposal is legally enforceable, is that fair? I'm looking to the monitoring officer, is that what we're asking? That we don't do anything that's not legally within our powers?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it isn't unlawful to make that proposal. No, yes, so yeah, and certainly we can, with the amendment the chief executive proposed, then I mean, as was alluded to, I mean, I haven't got the information for me either, so I would need to check. So yeah.
Okay, so I have to stay on board with second.
Okay, before we go then, Councillor.
I don't want to extend this unnecessarily, but I would like to support Councillor Jones's point about the Marine Code training, because we are legally liable for breaches of that code in Norfolk and Port and the other ports. So I can't see how anyone who has not done that training could sit on full council. So I'd like to just reinforce what Councillor Jones said.
Do we do the vote about motion now?
Yes. The alternative motion.
Alternative motion, yes. Okay.
But I would like to support the motion that has
Okay,
been.
that's not those, so we got a proposal.
You've got the original recommendations with the amendment Simon put forward, but also
Yeah.
you've got an alternative
Mm.
motion with the board. You take that one first and take the votes. If that's voted on, then that becomes the substantive motion.
Okay. So we've got a proposal.
Could the proposal and second check, if
Well,
there are
yes.
actually amendments which are suggested by the officer that we should take on board, because I don't want to cut something out because.
Can we read that out before we?
Yeah, I think actually Zach wants to say something. Clarify something, I'm sure.
Yes, sorry, John. Unless I've missed it, I don't think anybody moved the motion on the papers. So the only motion on the table is the one that was put forward, I think, by Councillor Bushell and seconded by Councillor Jones, if I remember rightly. So if that's the only motion on the table, then that's the only vote you need to take.
Okay, so Councillor Bush, are we happy with the wording?
What is the wording? Can we clarify?
Do you want to,
Unless Councillor Bush would like to
do you want to read?
clarify it, and then I'll have it.
Okay, so we can look back at Ken's addition to that because the seconder and the proposer are happy for that to be taken on board. But it is that councillors be informed at full council that if they're not up to date with their training, they will be sanctioned to whichever is legally imposable, when we don't want to break any rules, and that their suspension will be recorded on the attendance register as suspended from that committee or council if we're allowed to do so, including full council if we're legally allowed to put that as a sanction. I think the members of the room have all spoken, and it seems like
And that's,
they're supportive of
there's
that.
no, most of that, we've got full council in a few days' time. Would you be happy to change for the following full council?
Yes, I think if we could announce it at tomorrow's
Right,
meeting,
Right.
so that would give councillors an amount of time to
that's
clarify the
right,
trade.
yes.
Sorry.
But it's not,
It's town council tomorrow. Yeah.
I think it's a shot of the bow.
I think that's fair. It might motivate or nudge councillors into,
Yeah. Did you?
Sorry, do you want, sorry, I got half of it, but then you kind of got distracted. So, and the councillors be informed at full council that if they're not up to date with their training, that they will be sanctioned and suspended, and that suspension will be noted on the register that they are suspended from that committee.
yeah,
And it will also be counted as non-attendance if people keep on.
non-attendance with the reasoning of suspension.
So that they will be noted on a register that they are suspended and that non-attendance
Will be listed as a suspension rather
due
than.
their suspension.
Yeah, so instead of apologies, you just have a suspended from committee or something such like.
And that was seconded by councillor Jones, as it was it?
Sorry, Chair. Previously, this is to replace recommendation 2.2.
Yes.
So, yeah, and 2.1 is.
And that 2.1 was as per the amend.
If councillors are content with.
We could move 2.1.
Does that include everything you need us to?
Do you want to read out?
2.1
Read out the
five.
amended 2.1 again, and then obviously the addition then is your
Two
amended
points to get it.
2.2,
So
so that we're clear.
where are we in? This one here, isn't
Do you want me to?
it? Do you want to read it? Have you got it there?
I can do this.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So the amended 2.1 which was, I was proposing, here, was recommend to full council that to underline the importance associated with training highlighted as mandatory in the member training and development programme as set by full council. A sanction shall be imposed by the monitoring officer and or governance committee for any councillors who have not completed such training to be suspended from relevant committee brackets S pertinent to such training pending completion of the training. And then I think your proposal was to amend 2.2, which I was recommending was removed, but you'd put in a new 2.2, which is what you were proposing, I believe, councillor.
Yeah, with the clarifications, obviously, so some of that might appear in 2.1.
That's what I'm saying. Right.
Yeah, we might need to put some into 2.1, like the ramification of it being recorded on their attendance register.
I think all this bit.
All this, what's in 2.2 then?
What clarity told me to make a new proposal?
I think we've got the 2.1, which was obviously the amended version signed at the beginning, then your 2.2 is obviously your additional recommendation that you put
Yeah.
forward, subject to it being legally enforceable in terms of the full council situation.
Yeah.
So we've got a 2.1, which was amended by Simon, and then the 2.2, which was the addition that you've now put forwards.
Okay.
You will need to obviously put that forwards and obviously have a seconder and obviously do your vote.
Okay.
I've looked at the second, he seems he's
Are
happy.
you still suppose that? That's
I think
official.
that-
That's
yeah.
just second it. All in favour? Yeah.
Well, that recorded as unanimous, please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good. Right. Well, that's agenda item 8, isn't it? That's got to get through. So let's okay. So, monitoring officer again. Not what's in this one.
Hopefully this one will be a lot more straightforward. So, yes, this is just a sort of periodic report that the governance committee back on the 8th of June 2021 agreed as part of the procedure for the conduct of investigation report, anti-fraud, corruption and bribery policy and strategy. And it's just a report whether there were any incidents of fraudulent activity. My report is that there are no updates to be made and no incidents which have been reported to me as monitoring officer. The recommendation is that is noted.
Okay. Any comments? We don't need to vote on this one.
Noted.
Lovely. Thank you much, Steve. Okay.
Just to comment from
Yeah.
me, obviously, our internal audit programme includes an annual review of counter fraud arrangements in the council, which we will be undertaking later this year.
Okay, thank you. And I thank our motion officer for his 2 reports and patience. Dealing with us councillors, thank you. Right, 9. GSEC report, is it?
Me, Chair.
Oh, you, thank you.
Okay, so we have a duty to review our polling districts and polling places at least once every 5 years. The review aims to ensure that electors have reasonable facilities for voting. We'd like to start the review on the 2nd of October so that we can agree the polling districts and places to be used for the next police and crime commissioner elections in May 24, but also the next parliamentary when that's called. The aim of the timetable is to report back to Governance Committee and full council in January 2024, following the formal consultation period, with any alterations being timed to coincide with the revised register of electors on the 1st of February. The full timetable is shown on page 31 of your report. I'd like to refer members to the recommendations set out in section 2 of the report.
Any questions on this report? Councillor Shaw.
I see in there that you're looking at the geographical areas for, I guess, councillors, the number of councillors for the number of households there. I seem to remember there was a review, and correct me if I'm wrong, which added Mill on the Mole to South Molton, which was a very logical thing. But how do councillors feed into what they think is logical? Because obviously I worked with the leader of the council at that point, because he said to me, well, we've got these options. And I said, well, the people at Mill on the Mole feel like they're part of South Molton, and just because they're the wrong side of the river, you know, they're part of a different parish, and they were broadly supportive. But in the review, how do you go out to the district councillors and say, look, we need to increase the size of your parish or the area that you cover, and what would you think is logical?
At this stage, this report is looking to come based on the polling districts. It's not looking to do the sort of wider boundary check. That's the more the community governance reviews.
But that's to follow sometime in the future, isn't it?
It is, yes. That is a separate process, whereas we have to review these every sort of 5 years. Community governance is every sort of 10, 15 years, but we are aware that we need to be undertaking that. We would struggle resource-wise to do that with a general election, so we're just looking at the timetable when we're going to slot those reviews in, and again looking at parish boundaries they're likely to start for the next parish election before the change will take place. And obviously there's the knock-ons of any other boundary changes.
Just to add to that, Chair, so there's, when that happens, obviously there is full consultation that takes place, so there's opportunity at that point for input from the district in terms of that value.
Are we allowed to put something in there so the ward members will be contacted directly about any changes?
Is it applied anywhere?
When we undertake the community governance reviews, again, there was a full consultation and councillors.
Anything applied, councillor.
Yeah, just for clarity for point 2.5, the recommendation is made for council to amend the constitution to add a new delegated powers of chief executive in annex 2.3 of the consultation. Can we just ask clarity on why that's being added? Why it hasn't been added before? Why that's being done?
That may be a power that is already in place, if I'm honest. I would have to check, but it is just that where there's basically a change needed at the last minute and there isn't time to facilitate it in the.
I read that as a new power.
It does say new on the report.
I think if I may, it's to clarify previous practice. I have got certain powers as a returning officer and electoral registration officer, but this is making it clear that there's a specific power to designate polling places or polling stations at short notice. And this would happen where, for instance, and we have had it, unfortunately, where we've set up a polling station in a village hall, and suddenly that village hall becomes unavailable at very short notice. And so we have to redesignate a polling station. it is arguable that it comes within the powers anyway of a returning officer, but this makes it more specific.
It does seem very sensible to my view. There's 5 of us here, so.
Legally, can we clarify the wording of short notice? As we have a legal person here, it seems very woolly, this short notice. It could be 6 months if we thought that it would be too hard to organise councillors to make the decision.
Have you got a thought on notice where you would like for delegate power? And can you hear us?
Oh, sorry.
No.
Sorry.
Yeah, I was wondering.
Sorry, Chair. It's very strange because you were looking in one direction. I now realise you were looking at the screen
Oh,
towards me. If there were time to take it to members.
That's one way.
Yeah. If there was time to take it to members, for members to take the decision, then I would be doing that. But where the committee process didn't allow for that and we needed to set it up urgently, then I would be using this power. And we're not talking about, because, there are different timescales within an election. So we have to give notice to electors where their polling station is and so on. So if there's time before any of those deadlines to take it to members, then we would be doing so.
Okay, thank you.
Can I move with this report was recommended?
Officer Triggs had a hand up.
Also, but
I was just,
you're on my blind side, sorry.
Chair, I was just going to suggest that obviously as if it's not possible to wait for a decision of council, then obviously that's what the delegation's in place for.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
you could just remove at short notice. So obviously the recommendation says only when a decision is required and it's not possible to wait for a decision of council. So if that makes it clearer, then in a sense, it's at any time when obviously you can't take it to full council if it clears up the notice.
I'm happy with the clarification. So the word to say stay as is.
Excellent.
That's acceptable. So, a mover to agree to this recommendation to go to the full council. A mover, Councillor Howard Booth, thank you. A seconder. Things all in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. Good. Right, agenda item 10.
Thank you, Chair. So members, this report follows discussion we had at the June 23 meeting around use and spend of agency staff. And a request was for a report to come back to outlining spend on agency spend for the last couple of periods, and also some clarification about the use of those agency staff over which services. So I'm happy that this report sets that out for you. We've also had with us Nick Gordon, Head of Organisational Development, who's helped pull this report together with me. And we're both here to answer any questions that you may have. So the report sets out the use of agency spend for the last 2 financial years, 21-22 and 22-23, and also the first quarter of this financial year. It also sets out some of the challenges that we and other councils face in terms of recruitment into some of the substantive posts we have, and also some of the measures that we're putting in place to try and mitigate that. All local authorities are experiencing issues in employing and retaining staff. The market is very competitive, and obviously we're competing against a number of issues. What we are trying to do is put in place measures such as the planning manager talking about earlier around bringing in graduates, introducing or growing our own staff to try and mitigate and also retain staff into the longer term. The use of agency staff we have used for a number of years, and often a number of the agency staff used in frontline service such as waste and recycling, covering areas such as annual leave and sickness. Whereas we may obviously experience annual leave and sickness in some of the office areas, often those staff aren't replaced by agency staff because obviously there's not that day-to-day frontline requirement like there is with waste and recycling, where obviously it's important to try and maintain those staffing levels. So we try not to rely on agency staff, but there are obviously occasions when we are needed to, and more importantly, those areas are where we need to maintain core services and ensure that continuity of service provision. In terms of how we procure our agency staff, that's managed through a central contract, a consortium with other neighbouring Devon authorities, and that consortium is called Commensurate. That company provides the majority of our agency members of staff, but there are times when we have to deviate from that contract if they can't provide a professional member of staff that obviously we would aim to try and get through commensurate. So for example, if you're looking for a specialist environmental health officer and commensurate haven't got any specialist environmental health officers, then obviously we have to go outside of that contract and go to alternative agencies to provide those specialist members of staff. So the main service areas that we use agency are, as I've said, waste and recycling. We've used agency staff for building control, planning, environmental health and housing, and with some small usage in customer services, parking and the museum. As I've said, they're generally used in situations where we need to cover annual leave and sickness, but where we have encountered long-term sickness in some areas, or we've tried to recruit into a vacant post unsuccessfully, or for specific project work, or where we've seen significant increase in service demand, such as housing, temporary accommodation, etc., and we've needed to bolster our resources. Within waste and recycling, the use of agency staff is predominantly to cover a relief bank for those annual leave and sickness covers. But there has been a national shortage over the last couple of years for HGV drivers, and the agency route has been a valuable source to ensure that continued service provision. We're trying to mitigate that moving forwards by that relief bank of staff for covering leave and sickness by moving some of the agency staff onto the substantive payroll and having more permanent staff moving forwards to ensure that continuity of service. The table that's set out in section 4.7 is really just for context to show the age of our workforce. Almost 50% of our workforce are over the age of 51. A number of staff that have been with the authority for the long term. And it's important that we as a council start to plan for that resource moving forwards, because at some point, a number of those staff will retire. And that's why areas that we're exploring, such as a number of the schemes that we talked about earlier, where we've got staff in planning, where we're trying to bring in graduates, get them onto training schemes or grow our own. That's where we're trying to plan for the future, so that we have staff that are learning, growing with the organisation, and also act as that workforce planning into the future. However, the challenges that we've got, similar to other local authority, is that there's a national shortage of some of the more professional roles. So it's all well and good us growing and obviously bringing in younger staff and training them up, but we do need that higher level of expertise as well to support the graduates as they come through our services. Some of those areas we've seen that challenge is within Jeremy's area, so within our planning team, within our environmental health team, and within our building control officers. We've also seen where government have tightened some of the competency standards and registration requirements in some professions, especially in areas such as building control and environmental health. That a number of the individuals, once they get into their mid to late 50s, have now chosen to retire. So a lot of the resource pressures we're seeing are due to changing resources, and also where we've seen legislative requirements coming forwards. One of the big things that we've also seen, and certainly in the last 2 to 3 years, is recruitment into North Devon. In the past was quite an easy sell, because we can say, come and work in North Devon, it's a beautiful place to come and work, enjoy the lifestyle benefits outside of work, and have a job in North Devon. That's changed in light of the pandemic and the increased working from home and that hybrid working, because people can still live in North Devon, but they can work and still have the job that maybe they would have had in the city. They can earn a bigger salary, and that's part of the challenge we face in terms of our recruitment challenge, and obviously parts of the challenge we have to try and sell North Devon into the future. That is changing in terms of some of those organisations are trying to get staff back into the offices. So we hope in terms of the benefits of North Devon, that will benefit us, because then that ability to be able to sell North Devon into the future hopefully brings us back into that same market we had before. But certainly the hybrid patterns and working from home has been one of the challenges we've had in terms of attracting staff with the salaries that we have on offer. Some councils are exploring options such as offering a 4-day working week. But I think one of the clear things for us is around that culture of trying to make North Devon an inviting place to work for, and also the reputation of North Devon Council being an exciting employer and a rewarding place to work. That's important that we set that standard for us as officers, but also for you as members as well. So the officers are attracted to North Devon. They want to work in a place where they can feel proud. As much as there obviously is challenge in terms of working in local government, we've all got a responsibility to make it a welcoming place that people want to come and work for. Local authorities do offer a great degree of path for employees. A number of our staff have been here and got successful long careers. We've got a history of developing staff, and hopefully that will continue in terms of bringing staff up through the ranks. And a number of the current senior management team, even some of those sat on the table today, started their employment through those early entry schemes and are still sat here 13, 14 years later. The planning, health and housing service has started to take some positive actions to try and address some of those challenges. Most notably, as Tracy pointed out earlier, we have 2 officers undertaking apprentice MSc urban planning degrees. The authority is paying for that training, but we hope that investment will then pay dividends in terms of retaining those staff into the future. We've got 1 officer undertaking a chartered town planning degree. Again, that's funded through the apprenticeship levy. We've got 2 officers undertaking level 6 environmental health practitioner apprenticeships, again funded through the levy. Both of those officers are neighbourhood wardens and have been sort of the forefront of some really positive social media campaigns recently as well. We've got 1 officer undertaking a level 6 degree in building control surveying. 2 graduates have had the opportunity to undertake a special master's degree in planning, and they're now doing MSc top-ups. And finally, we've got 2 officers undertaking chartered town planning apprenticeships. So that's just a few examples of how Jeremy and the team are trying to have a change of emphasis where we've seen areas where we've struggled to recruit those professional staff into. But as Tracy pointed out earlier, it's important those lower level staff are then supported by the senior officers on the other side. And that's where we've had to engage some of those senior posts that we struggled to recruit into via the agency route so that they gain that experience. And that's passed on through the lower level staff. The investment in those officers is a positive move to show that we've got a commitment to those current staff and also attracting new officers into the authority. As word gets around that we're an authority that wants to invest in the staff, hopefully that enables us to sell North Devon and bring new staff into the authority. In terms of some of the detail around our agency spend, a large proportion of that spend is linked to that bank staff I touched on earlier for waste and recycling. Around 650,000 is what we spend on covering the annual leave and sickness within the service. And that's to provide a like-for-like cover to make sure that we can still send out crews of a driver and 2 loaders, and that we can maintain that core service. Some authorities cover that bank staff not via the agency route, they cover it via employing their staff direct, and we're looking to move that across and employ a number of substantive posts so that reliance on the agency staff moving forwards will hopefully be lower. The other part of the agency spend is where we have been unable to recruit into some of the vacant posts. Some examples of that, again, within planning, where we've been out to advert on 3 occasions for a service lead, a senior planning officer and a planning officer with limited success. We've currently re-advertised those posts, but we've now widened where we advertise those posts too. So now we're going out to various other routes such as Facebook, LinkedIn, Indeed, Public Sector Today, South West Times, whereas previously we were advertising maybe on our website and in the local gazette. So hopefully we're now starting to reach a much larger audience. And also that transition of hopefully less hybrid working and a more flexible approach hopefully makes it an attractive proposition for people to come to North Devon. The spend table shown in section 5 of the report just sets out how much we've spent on agency staff. So for 21-22, we spent just under £1 million. In terms of the context, our total pay bill is around 17 million. So in terms of what proportion that relates to, that obviously we can work out in terms of how much of our spend on agency relates to the proportion of our overall pay bill. In 22-23, that went up to 1.5 million. And in the first quarter of this year, we've spent about 400,000. So the spend this current year is obviously in line with where we were in 22-23. Some of the cost increase in 21-22 will be partly down to the pay award. So the pay award that was given for staff for 21-22 would have increased, obviously, the pay, sorry, for 22-23 would have obviously increased the amount of spend because that goes through the agency as well. The agency rates they get to make sure that they're on comparable levels to what we pay our substantive posts. The other main reason for the increase is what I touched on so far in terms of that challenge with recruiting into some of those more professional roles, such as the planning officers, environmental health officers, and building control. But as I've alluded to, the team are trying to take some positive action, which hopefully will reduce and mitigate the use of agency staff in those areas as we move forwards. Table in section 5 does set out obviously the total agency cost. That does include the cost of those bank staff in terms of covering covering sickness and leave, which we would always do, whether we do it via agency or via substantive posts. Outside of that, if that 650,000 is dealt with differently and we employ them directly, the actual spend on agency for 22-23 comes down to less than £1 million. It comes down to 900 and something thousand pounds. In terms of how that fits compared to what other councils are spending and how that fits into the national picture, there was a recent article published, which was information that was obtained via a freedom of information request, that on average, across the authority, there was an average 6% of spend that authorities were spending on agency staff. That was the average. Obviously, a lot of authorities were higher than that, and the highest amounted to 42% in one council. If we look at our own figures, and if we take out the bank staff, because in a sense they're not covering vacant posts, they're covering an element of post that we need to cover, whether we do it via agency or via the substantive route, our spend on agency is 899,000. Compared to our budgeted spend on employees of 17 million, that equates to 5.3%. So the level of our agency spend on covering vacant posts or covering areas where we've not been able to recruit into is 5.3%, which actually is slightly below the average for the rest of the country. There is a myth that employing agency staff costs more money. The costs are higher, but the cost that we pay the agency isn't what the agency employee gets. So obviously we pay a salary to our staff we employ here on a substantive post. If we pay the agency 40 or 50 pounds an hour for a planning officer, that's not the rate that the agency person is getting, because the rate of paying the agency also includes the employee's on costs that we're paying. So there'll be an element of employees' national insurance that we're paying the agency for them to obviously pay on to HMRC. Plus there's the rate the agency firm get themselves as well. So the rate the agency worker receives is less than the rate that we pay the hourly rate to the agency. For comparison purposes, the salary that we pay obviously officers here. On top of that, we obviously are responsible for employees' national insurance and pension contributions. So again, that is built into our budget, which is circa £17 million for the year. I think one of the big things to also consider is the context in terms of our overall employee budget of 17 million. That 17 million covers our substantive posts, also covers the staff I talked about earlier in terms of covering that agency sickness and leave in our waste and recycling team. And where we've talked then about maybe some of those posts being vacant and we've used agency staff, how does that then impact our overall pay bill? So our overall salary budget is £17 million for our total salaried costs. If we are unable to fill some of our posts and we've used agency staff like we have in planning, then does that exceed our budget overall? The answer to that is no, because obviously we manage that through the timings of the vacancies and also the amount of use of agency staff that we have. And that is confirmed in terms of our outturn position, in terms of how much we spend on our salary costs. So for 21-22, we budget for an anticipated vacancy savings, which is 250,000 a year. Taking into account what we spent on salaries and also what we spent on agency, we exceeded that vacancy savings target by 99,000. So we actually achieved 349,000, even once we paid out the agency costs as well. Similarly to 22-23, we actually exceeded that target by 226,000, even once the net costs of the agency are taken out as well. So I think it's around how we manage that resource in terms of making sure we've got sufficient resources for our service areas to deliver those core services. And moving forwards, as we've talked about with the work that Jeremy and the team are doing, some of those areas where we've seen some high costs in 21-22 and 22-23, it's how we can recruit into those posts successfully, how we can try and move staff that are on agency over to the more substantive roles and maintain a number of positions so our reliance on agency staff becomes less as we move forwards. But I think, as you can see, Chair, the figures within the report are in line, if not less than what a lot of the other councils are experiencing on this. I think that hopefully gives you a whistle stop to all of the
One whistle.
agency applications. And I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Clarifications, is that excluding that on the agency staff?
Yes.
Thank
So
you, because
where
we claim that back.
we can reclaim that.
And just for reassurance, and I'm sure if it is undertaken, but the staff do receive basic training and induction, agency staff, along with that we will give our own staff. I know there's longer term training, but we can, etc.
They do, and so especially in our sort of frontline operations such as waste and recycling, as new agency staff coming in, they will receive training straight away on that first day before they go out on operations.
And just in case the council don't understand, the levy is sort of clawing back money which the council has to pay to a central body, essentially the payroll, and then you can access that and then, yeah.
That's correct. So based on the size of organisation, there's a percentage you pay of your overall payroll that goes in as an apprenticeship levy. So we have to pay that anyway. If we didn't employ any apprenticeships or didn't use that levy pot for any training, in a sense, that's just money lost in that door. But what it enables Nikki and the team to do is look at posts in the organisation, whether they be new apprentices coming in or substantive posts we've got that we might want to attach some apprenticeship training to enable us to access that pot to then pay for that training.
And obviously we can't discuss it now, but in part B under page 115, there's a bit more information of sort of mitigating what the council are doing under this mention, I think. So a lot of detail, a lot of figures. I think we've covered some of the planning concerns earlier on. Not two questions, we will to resolution.
Yeah. I feel awkward going against statistics and Officer Triggs because he's very good with statistics. We all know though, numbers show what numbers show, don't they? And we can interpret them all differently. So my maths say that if we include the section 5.2, we're at about 10% of our staffing costs being.
No, that's clever. The revenue staff, you employ direct, or through, not to voluntary agency.
So we frontline staff we employ direct, but obviously those frontline staff have 25 days annual leave, and obviously there's an element of sickness there. So some councils cover that by employing a pool of staff in order for them to be shared across the year and cover those leave and sickness. Some councils like us use agency for that purpose. So we use agency for that purpose. It's included in the agency spend, and we're quite transparent that that's in there. But obviously, if you're looking at what use of agency staff for covering vacant posts or filling posts where we're unable to recruit into, then in a sense, that's why we've just shown that as a comparable. So, okay, if you take the pool out that are just covering sickness and leave in an area where you might have employed them directly, our comparison is obviously based on that. But correctly, right, if you include what we totally spend, 1.5 million is slightly less than 10%.
Oh, sorry, I used projected figures from the 23-24 and just.
I think we're in the door.
That's better. Sorry, I've just lost my mind. It's doing an update, so I'm going to have
Should we come back to you?
No, it's going to take ages. It's not iOS 17, isn't it?
That's fine.
So.
Well, the hard copy.
No, it's fine. I have some notes. We understand that figures that have been attained are that we do have agency staff, which if we ran them pro rata, they'd be above £100,000 a year. Could you give us examples of the total agency cost? You know, so that for a spinal point, I don't want to look into any particulars. We have spinal points for each job. So what would the cost be for a set, and you can choose your spinal point, versus an employee plus the superannuation, or you call it up something or other?
On cost.
Costs, okay, yeah. So how would they look, the cost of the authority? So what sort of percentage differences are the agencies charging us, I guess, above the employee's wage on spinal point plus
Are
superannuation?
you asking what the commission, an agency charge?
Yeah, I was just saying agency charges.
Yeah, so if there's one person who is employed by the council, plus their superannuation, and then what would the agency charge for the same person? Are we looking at double the cost?
I mean, the agency person won't necessarily be in our pension scheme. So for us as an authority, we have a salary for a substantive role that varies depending on what post you're doing in the authority. On top of that, you'll pay employee national insurance, which should be about 13%. And then on top of that, you will have the employee's pension contribution.
Yeah, so that's what
About a further 19%, something like that. So you've got about 30 something, 32% going on top of the salary cost for the substantive employee. For an agency employee, you'll have the hourly rate for the post they're doing, which they will receive. On top of that, the employer's national insurance will be the same. Obviously, the employer's national insurance is set by HMRC, and then you have the agency percentage that they charge us for providing the agency employee.
Right.
That agency percentage, Nick, I can't recall what that is through commensurate. I don't know whether you have that to hand.
Sorry, Chair, it actually varies depending on the level of the post in terms of the percentage it's added on in terms of the agency charge. There isn't just a set fee across the board for all levels of post.
So if we said somebody who was on £35,000, because that's not the low end, that's not the high end, is it? That's somewhere in the middle. What sort of cost would that be from the agency?
Is it more,
The percentage from the agency will be lower than the employer's pension contribution that we're making on substantive posts. Because obviously we are making the employer's pension contribution obviously from this end, unless they opted out of the pension scheme, in which case if they've opted out, then there's no employer pension contribution. So for us, that pension contribution is around 18 or 19%. For the agency provider, obviously they're paying the employer's national insurance. Again, depending on whether they are in a pension scheme, they won't be in the local government pension scheme, but they might be on another pension scheme somewhere else, in which case they will pay the appropriate percentage. I suspect it's lower than what the LGPS one is, but local government, but obviously there will be the corresponding percentage they'll pay for the agency. So there is a correlation there. There will be some percentages.
Okay, so an employee that was on, say, £35,000 a year, you're saying there's a 30% above that cost.
That's an all.
So
That's, yeah.
doing the maths, that's
let's say 10,
yeah, so that's going to take us up 10,000. So somebody who's on a spinal point, which gives them £35,000 a year, is costing us just over 45, 6, something like that. What would the agency be charging for somebody who was at that same spinal point?
It depends on the post, but I don't think you have that agency percentage here with us. We can find it out about you.
Because that's very important. The two things that troubled me were that, and
that's, can I say the clarity? Do the agency figures cover annual leave? My experience in the past, agencies add annual leave payments to charge.
There is, it never used to.
No.
Under the working time directive, then after they've been with us for so long, then obviously we do have to then pay annual leave as well.
Yes.
So
It's difficult to measure apples to apples.
it is, yeah, but certainly after they've been with us for a period of time, then the working time directive means there is a leave requirement to cost there as well. So I think you've got Ken, you might want to cover the floor.
Ken, do you think?
Yeah, I was just going to respond to Councillor Bushell's point. I think it'd be really difficult to do that, Councillor Bushell, because as John just said, it depends on the post, and even then it would depend on the market forces at play at that particular time. So we often see fluctuations. So if, for instance, I don't know, for the sake of argument, planning officers are very much in demand at that particular time, then we see the hourly rates go up. And it would also depend on the experience of that agency staff member. I mean, whether we could, outside of this meeting, have a look at a model post, if you like, an EHO or a planning officer, and do a comparison with the costs of a typical agency worker, for instance, going into one of those posts. We might be able to do that, but it wouldn't be entirely accurate because of those different factors at play all the time.
I think that'd be a really good idea. The other thing which I think we need to add to our risk register is John's graph about the age of our workers, because we have rather got a ticking time bomb. So I think it would be right of the governance committee to look into that.
I was going to perhaps ask some of the future, perhaps we never report on actions you're looking at.
Could could I close with,
Yes, sir.
I'm really glad to see that this authority is training within, promoting from within. I think that SMT are right, that if you treat your employees well, you hope that they will have some level of, you know, empathy with the organisation. And I'm guessing that those who do either postgraduate or degree level training will contractually be tied to the authority, so we can recoup the costs of that training, because that would be an industry standard, wouldn't it?
So with all of our training, Chair, for you, we do tie our training contracts into our, so for a period of time, they retain that if they do leave, then obviously those training costs are repaid.
Yeah.
Obviously, over as that time goes on, then obviously the percentage of what they repay does come down. And just to come back on the corporate risk in terms of the workforce age, so in our corporate risk register, we do have a risk around failure to prioritise and build sufficient capacity to deliver. So that link in terms of having a workforce plan for the future, which Nikki and the team are and continue to work on, obviously does go in there to mitigate that risk in terms of doing the good things that Jeremy and the team are doing in terms of bringing in that future replacement for us, older generations that fall into that category of the graph.
In that risk register, have we factored in those officers who retire early?
We're covering that on the part B, so we can
Start to replace some of the talent that we do have.
And through those measures such as the work that Nick and team doing, that's part of our plan, is to make sure we invest in the staff to have those officers of the future, so that we can allow our more experienced staff to retire at the appropriate age.
I just thought I'd pay that as a side compliment to Samantha.
Yeah, thank you. Just thank you, Officer Chase, because it's a detailed report. You definitely answered the question. That's clear. So thank you for all the detail. A few questions. So I think we completely. I think most people understand the need for this resource and the importance of it. And I think the main area of concern and questioning is particularly coming around planning. So a few questions just to add context. So do we roughly know what the salary bill is in planning? To give it some form of context. So what are, in terms of salaries, planning per year, roughly? That context of what that figure is.
But it's within our budget book, which is on our website, so we can find that out.
Okay,
that's fine. Obviously, our total payroll 17 million, but obviously part of that will be the planning team. So again, that's information we can bring back and let me share.
I think you can find also, I've been nosy, you can go online and just spend.
The website's down at the moment. And for some reason I didn't see it down.
The website's up and running now.
It's not. It's most of it's down.
Yeah,
We can't access anything. So
I tried to look at councillors and committees, and it just had nothing. It would give you the heading at the top, but there was no information contained on it.
Because we've removed all the committee to council.
Oh, we've suspended them all.
I've got some clarity. Sorry, we're moving across to the website or website.
We might need to go to information.
that's why I've been.
Yeah.
Just on those questions, then, if we, because we can't find that detail, it'd be interesting to know. But would it be a fair assumption from I've heard this from speaking from a chief executive of a planning authority not very far from here, that their experience of temporary planning staff was that they couldn't necessarily expect the same quality as they would from in-house staff? Is that a fair assumption?
Agency staff have to learn our policies. So there is a time when there is a loss of efficiency because they won't be familiar necessarily with our local plan.
Yeah.
So I would accept that. I would recognise that we have some excellent agency planners supporting the service. So I wouldn't accept that there's a correlation between a lack of competency in the people that we're bringing to the organisation to support us at this time.
Okay, and is there limitations? Because the obvious question is, if we're spending such a significant proportion on agency staff, and this was kind of why I was asking the question of what the salary bill in that department is, the obvious question is, But I don't know if there's limitations. Is there limitations to salaries? I'm going to assume we're probably fairly benchmarked. It's probably information beneficial to see where our salaries sit in terms of benchmarks locally, nationally, and other regions. But also, is it not a matter of, does that extra spend not give us justification to significantly increase the salaries in planning department for new, particularly when we're recruiting new positions to make ourselves more competitive?
So in the last 12 months or so, in areas where we've been particularly challenged, so planning, building control, we've completely redrafted everyone's job description and tested those jobs through the council's evaluation scheme. And there has been a level of betterment through that process. But we have a prescribed process, so I'm confident that our job descriptions are right and they're current, and we're using the scheme to best effect. There's a national shortage of planning officers. The market is brutal. The paper makes reference to the fact that we've advertised for 3 positions in planning over the summer months: a service lead, a senior planning officer, and a planning officer.
I saw them.
So I can provide some update now on the outcome of those recruitment processes. There was 1 applicant for the service lead. That's positive, but we wait to see whether that person will join us. There was 1 applicant for the senior planning officer, and that was an internal person that applied for it. And there were no applications for planning officer. And that is not a great return, but officers advertise those posts right the way through summer.
Yeah.
So this is something that was opened on a Monday and closed on a Friday. Every opportunity was given to the marketplace, and still we get a very disappointing level of interest. That is the market that we're seeking to bring people to the council.
Nice. And sort of, you mentioned about sort of time to for induction section, but do you find occasionally, from my experience, some agent staff bring a wealth of knowledge in their professional field as well?
Yeah, absolutely. There was 1 officer within our DM service at the moment who is an absolute asset. And is supporting, as John alluded to, we need senior people to support our junior officers.
Yeah.
Our model of engaging graduates and apprentices is dependent on having a core of more senior people to provide that kind of training.
Yeah.
And we've got one person, say, who's particularly excellent at this, on providing that support to more junior colleagues.
So I think what's reassuring is work is progressing. Training investment for the medium and longer term.
Just back to my point, benchmarking though, in terms of where we sit, in terms of benchmarking, you guys have a rough idea.
Is that something you can come back with?
Yeah. Jeremy, who's obviously to work at government planning, we benchmark with other employers and obviously other local authorities in terms of where our salaries sit. So within finance, we'll compare. The difficulty sometimes though is you're not necessarily comparing apples with apples. So you might be comparing an accountant in North Devon with an accountant or finance officer in Mid Devon, but they might have slightly different responsibilities in terms of what's in their job description. So even though we do benchmarking, we do need to understand sometimes that what we're asking our staff to do might be slightly different to what we're asking maybe a member of staff at another council to do. So, but it does give us ideas that we can outreach and understanding what others are paying for specific roles.
Where do we generally sit against that benchmark?
Generally, we're in the middle, sometimes we're on the upper end. For some posts, we have been on the upper end.
I think the point I'm getting at is with this increase of expenditure, are we not in a position that we can be offering above the benchmark to make sure that we're securing more people?
I think what's been reassured is you look at one area, France, for the grading. Do you use a national grading scheme?
Use a job evaluation scheme here, which grades our roles, and within the national pay scales. So obviously it evaluates a college to sit within a certain pay grade. But those salary grades are set at national levels. Okay. You can deviate from that and have spot salaries, but obviously the danger then is you're comparing posts within the authority, then maybe might have relations with other posting authorities. So we've got to be a little bit mindful in terms of
Equal pay and so I think I'm too second. And then absolutely.
Yeah, can I just comment on that, because we do have to be quite careful with pay issues. I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail because we are in part A here, not part B. But we'll have seen from the press recently the trouble that Birmingham City Council has been in relation to equal pay claims. To sort of prevent that sort of thing happening, that's why we have a job evaluation system, which measures the value of different posts against other posts within the organisation. You can depart from that slightly by paying sort of sign-on bonuses, if you like, golden handshakes or golden hellos, and some authorities have done that. They've also done market supplements. The difficulty with that is you then end up perhaps with one member of staff on exactly the same grade as another member of staff, but who hasn't benefited from that golden hello, and that can create bad feeling within the teams, if you like. So we have decided not to go down that road at the moment because whilst there might be some short-term gain, there's no long-term benefit in terms of team cohesiveness, nor in terms of retaining that member of staff, because once that market supplement finishes, it's very likely that you'll lose that member of staff. What we need to do as a council, I think, and this is what all councils are trying to do, because if you ask any of my colleagues, what is the biggest challenge that you're facing? We all used to say, well, it's local government finance. Nowadays, it's recruitment and retention, obtaining the right staff and attracting the right staff and retaining the right staff. That's the biggest challenge that local authorities have got, because we're competing not just against each other, but we're also competing against the private sector. So a planning officer, for instance, coming to work for us, chances are they could probably earn more in the private sector, as could a solicitor, as could an accountant. Any other professions could probably earn more. So we need to attract staff that have that public service ethos that runs through a district council, and we have to attract staff that actually want to work for a district council to serve the community. There's a whole host of things we can do, and I think Councillor Bushell referred to the training, bringing staff through, attracting graduates, that type of thing. All of that's brilliant, and all of that we need to embrace fully. But there's also a hell of a lot else that we can do about making the workplace an attractive place to be, and making North Devon Council an attractive employer. And all of us have a part to play in that. You know, senior management, colleagues, councillors as well, because if we don't make it attractive, then people will just depart. And I certainly don't want to see the sector as a whole, local government sector, never mind the district council. I certainly don't want it to see it eventually ending up relying on agency staff, because whilst we all use agency staff to fill gaps, we can't run an organisation on that way, not very efficiently anyway. We need people that are embedded within the organisation and are living the organisation's values in the same way that we do. So we have done an awful lot. We have we've prepared behaviour framework, which has been drawn up effectively by the staff. So that sets out the attributes and the behaviours that they expect of colleagues. We live those behaviours, we use them continuously, and we do that to make sure that staff are happy working for the council. There's a whole load of other softer stuff that we do around mental health awareness, around supporting individuals. We've even, given staff advances on their salaries when they've been suffering through the cost of living crisis. A whole load of stuff that we do, which is probably really difficult to list today. But all of that makes us an attractive employer. But what we now need to do, I think, is probably do more in going out to the universities, going out to the colleges, going out to the schools, and actually finding those people who have that public service ethos, and explaining to them what local government does, explain to them the benefits of local government and how satisfying it is at times to work for a local government, and making sure that they're attracted to us. It's a continuing challenge But it is a challenge that we need to face up to, and we need to lick really. So we can find that information out about, pick a standard officer if you like, and see how that compares with an agency spend. But I think the biggest message from this is what we can all do as a council to try and reduce the spend on agency by attracting more permanent staff to the organisation.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you. Any more questions?
Yeah, I was surrounded, we mentioned building control a few times, so I'm guessing that's comes under Officer Mann's remit somewhat, although it's partnered with Mid Devon. I don't know if it's a post-COVID thing or whether it's just to have the conditions that they'd like to work in. I understand that they don't really use the office very much anymore, and they're either on the site visits or they're working from home. I'm guessing that Mid Devon aren't hiring office space from us for the site that building control are in. If building control aren't in that office, which we previously have rented that part of the Woodland Enterprise Centre out, can we perhaps have a benefit of being able to use those rooms that are available there and not needed by building control to rent those out again?
Cherry polished. Either of you.
You go first, you go first, you're more even.
So it's fair to say there is a reduced use of the facility at South Morton. The overhead cost on the service is around £10,000, I believe. And it's right, moving forward, that position is reviewed. You can seek to manage costs.
But can we look at the bigger picture of how we use our estates, which we've got a legal officer for commercialisation and.
Were you saying that the Mid Devon don't give us a contribution towards the?
It's a cost to, Chair, it's a cost to the partnership. I think it is around £10,000. I know it to be around £10,000. There is a reduction in the use of that facility. It's right that we review the situation.
Thank you.
And the change to that, it's proportionally shared, so the proportion shares of the partnership, Mid Devon will then pay that.
I think it is good, if those officers don't need to be in the space, and they are primarily, I guess, field based, aren't they? Going out, checking, applying, make sure things are right, that if we can make their conditions better and that's what they'd like to do, then that's what we should do, is try and hold them.
Accepted into account. Thank you. Yes, for sure.
Does the council operate referrals? The staff referrals? Recruitment referrals.
Recruitment.
Yeah. It's something we just adopted in the organisation I work for. It was very, very effective, along with Facebook advertising.
We advertise in terms of posts, obviously we try and do recruitment days, we'll hold some recruitment fairs. So we try different methods of trying to get started. So there are lots of things that the team are trying to do to make the posts more widely available. So before we only used to advertise quite locally for certain posts, we're now widening that in terms of audience we're trying to reach. And where we are looking for things like HGV drivers, we will do social media posts to try and get.
But there isn't like an internal referral scheme. So if you refer a friend, you get £500 or something like that.
Are we subscribed to a benefits scheme rather like the NHS are?
We've got certain things that we try and push. So we do encourage things like pension scheme, but also additional contributions in pension. So sort of tax, salary sacrifice schemes, etc. So we do cycle scheme. NHS obviously have other schemes where they get discounts and so we haven't explored that yet, but it's something we talked about at SMT a few weeks ago as part of our organisation development. And again, as part of that, making Mid Devon Council attractive place to come and work for and the benefits you get. So those types of things are what we're now looking to try and explore to see whether any of those benefits could work for them. So that is something that
Yeah, I know we might be able to get in one of the things the NHS get is a discount on Apple products, and the amount we spent on it, perhaps we could do a deal with them.
And we, some of us have been going for 3 hours, and I wonder if we could have a couple of minutes break. But also, when we resume,
Where are we?
could we take the reports as read, because we have spent quite a long time at home reading them, and it's cut straight to the chase.
We're getting close to the agenda. Can we get to end of part A? I do think I need to take a bit break. We're only a couple items away, aren't we? Yeah. Let's see if let's see if our colleagues can take that on board and just see, to test my report. Are we agreed to move on?
Yeah.
Sure. Can we agree to note that report?
Yeah.
And the actions from that, thank you. Put the agenda 10. 11.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
just in case the officer man retires before we have the next meeting, can we please thank him for
Yes,
his
thank you.
service and his work.
And good luck with whatever the future brings you.
Fishing, dolphin.
It won't be fishy,
No.
no, or dancing,
No.
but that's very kind. I do appreciate the sentiments, thank you very much.
Is it true that you're moving to the Virgin Islands?
No, we've got no council.
Sure. Yeah, okay. We agree to stop for 5 minute break? What agreement? Good.
Thank you.
I just noted the agenda.
Thank you. Probably just to our officers and I can keep you here. Councillors very enthusiastic, it's great.
Sorry?
Our councillors, yeah, are very enthusiastic.
They are.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Be aware we're adjourned, but we have still got a member present.
Yes, I'm doing it so long.
It's just adjourned to 5 minutes.
Right, so I can play this one, but I guess that's it's like a reading that it beats it in the work going in. Yeah. That's opened up and done the. Yeah. Right. It's very towards it. And people sharing where those positions are.
It's taken over 20 grand, it's not answered.
Yeah.
John, are you happy for me to drop out now? Because I've got a holiday glass of wine waiting for me.
I was going to say, you're on holiday anyway, so then you drop out, enjoy your wine and have a great holiday.
All right, cool.
Good, mate.
All right, cheers then.
Thank you. Cheerio.
See you later.
Oh, really?
I'm getting to these, all right. She's very interesting. Yeah, that's rules that.
I'm still recording, David, so I don't think it's always dangerous. Is everybody else a bit warm, or is it just me? Because I turned this end on, but not that one. Are you right over there? It's quite warm. So let's turn that one on.
It's awake, isn't it?
Yeah.
Ken gone for his holiday,
Yes, he's gone off left.
Yeah, I think that's it.
The member of press was for them.
Oh, that's okay.
But we're still recording, but I'll edit this better.
There was some secretive things.
Yeah.
Same.
There were all sorts of secretive.
No, no, it's.
Yeah. Nice.
I'd rather keep them on the door to lose them. Lose control.
Is it possible to not have the whole report read out? Because, I spent so much time earlier today reading.
I think
I mean, brilliant.
the last report was quite
Yeah, I think that's specifically.
Yes.
my-
Chase.
And we'll answer all the questions.
I shall never get home.
No, I don't understand. No, but I think John,
And some of us have to
I
work.
think, no, it's just the option.
Yes.
Get to work next day.
I just think the last one was, it needed a lot of detail to it.
Because the press were there.
Fair enough.
Yes, the other ones. So I'm trying to do-
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I'm critical, I'll blame you.
That was that one. Then, Ross. Sorry, that one is, that's walls, I think. Yours says 12, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
12.
Yeah.
Then what was there for 13?
Yes.
14.
They're
is
quite,
literally
they're
just the
quite, they're
letter.
quite, both reports quite short this time, aren't they? So
Yeah. Yeah.
You're going to say, any questions? No.
it's more, I think it might have more discussion around the work programs.
With the work programme, I will talk you updated on
Oh, no, was it on this, there's a few actions.
So there's that one there. That's on there, so that's been changed. And then, yeah, I've really spoke to you.
Oh.
It's very kind of you. I hope I didn't before coming. In the car. In a lot of buses.
And then I'm still. I'd already told the people that log up, it might be a bit later.
I'll give them a 5-minute break.
Value.
It's,
I've seen the card fee, yes. Oh, and.
but that's being changed next week. Yeah.
And they do, and you know, I know. Hey.
Just remind me, if I've updated today, so, you know. Well, happy birthday. I'm putting sound waiting.
Can you clarify what you were referring to?
That's fine.
What I think this is that, the song was collected, and I just.
When that happens, that means that you have those.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
That's all we need to do when. But there's people contact there. It's done.
Thank you. Right, so are we all here?
It's.
No, thank you for attending, I do appreciate that. And we restart,
Yeah, I'm still recording, so it's.
thank you.
Yeah.
So, councillors, are we ready to start? We get started, sorry. That's right, let's make sure. Right, agenda item 11. This was just a report from the chair, which goes to full council.
Just to know that.
It just, you know, that one, we only had one meeting, this summarises the last meeting's, discussions and actions. Can I have a proposal? Refresh that. Seconder? All agreement? Good, thank you.
It showed that you had a good grasp of the committee.
In your chair, you realise who writes this. But, you know, credit to you.
It's got your name on it.
Exactly, great. Thank you.
What?
Right, we're now on to item 12. And it's internal audit.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So Paul Miller from Devon Audit Partnership. I won't go into a lot of detail on these. Obviously, three reports for you
Yes, thank you.
to discuss, the Green Lanes, homelessness and partnerships. I suppose just to take each one of them in brief, I suppose Green Lanes, yeah, good arrangements, but I think we think the council could do more to report on how it sits in with its other councils sort of initiatives of in Barnstable and so on. So how does it sit in with that? Homelessness, yeah, good arrangements to look after homeless people and working in partnership with others. But we note that more could be done to brief members on this rising challenge of homelessness. Obviously, there's a financial cost involved in there. And then partnerships, again, so it's not a legal requirement, like it is for contracts to have a sort of partnership register, but it's good practice. And we've been working with officers to create a sort of partnership register. And actually, we do suggest that it go to a member type body. These are arrangements with organisations where there's a real cost and, you know, officer resource to support them and so on. So we do think probably member review, perhaps an annual basis, is needed. And I suppose that's all I'm going to say. So is there any questions raised?
And perhaps while there, just remind you all, there is you're hosting
We have a
today.
Yeah. We have a free half-day event at Backfast Abbey on the 16th of November, and there's a buffet as well. So obviously we're going to provide sessions on for audit committee members. So anyone
But I'll be there.
who wants to attend, please do so.
Any contribution?
Yeah, I was reading through this. I don't know if it's the Grant Thornton or to our section 151 officer. I'm confused. It's like, my apologies. The counter frauds are around things like council tax. So how do you enforce whether, I mean, I'm a single occupant. You know, nobody would ever live with me. But how do we double check other than people being just honest and saying, yeah, I had my girlfriend move into me, I don't want my discount anymore?
It's good to mention, actually. I think you can.
No, that's a very good question. Obviously, we carry out reviews. We've also Devon Partnership are there's a piece of work carried out funded through the county council that will carry out that single occupancy review. So they will look at data and database to carry out a review in terms of single occupancy discounts that we give. But we also do National Fraud Initiative data matching. So we will compare information we hold on electoral registration to then information we have on council tax database. So the electoral reg tells us that there are 2 people occupied in this property, but you're still obviously holding the single occupancy discount, then obviously that will flag up that there is obviously an imbalance there.
But we only do that once a year.
We will carry out that review regularly. So the NFI is only one avenue. We will obviously carry out that review where we will obviously ask you to confirm that obviously you are still a single occupant. But we will also use other information that we've got. So the NFI matches obviously review that. Through the matching, we'll obviously see if there's any information that comes out that way. And also our officers will go out and do visits as well. So we've got visiting officers that will go out to houses and carry out checks as well.
So how if you took on a lodger and you were a single occupant, obviously you want to see if that, you know, you can have somebody on holiday for a couple of weeks or for a month, I guess, staying as long as they're registered in another address. But if you took on a lodger, somebody might not want to remove their discount until they realise the lodger was happy within that house. Would you say it should be a week after they've moved in, 2 weeks, a month? That
it should be immediate, really, because ultimately at the end of the day, it's your responsibility as, in a sense, the landlord to confirm to the council that you are no longer the single person living in that premises.
I can say that
it's only because I've been asked about this, you know, when girlfriends are moving in with people. And I wonder whether there was a hard line or whether it is just, well, you can try it out for a week. You might fall out within a week.
a hard line, you're in or you're out.
I wouldn't recommend trying it out. I would recommend you can contact the council and tell us that, or the person tells us that obviously there is no longer single occupancy discount. So the onus is on the council taxpayer to inform us, but we do have other checks and measures in place behind the scenes where we will carry out matching exercises. And as I said, the audit partnership will also carry out a piece of work for all of the Devon councils, because obviously it's in all our interest to make sure that single occupancy discount is only being given where it's due, because ultimately that is reducing the amount of income that not only comes to this council, but also goes to the county council and other frontline services as well, such as the police and the line.
I mean, I must credit the team. Had a tenant move back within a week, and also just gone out to say what it's empty.
Yeah.
So, you know, on some councils you wait weeks, they go get out of hand about who knows what they've done.
Yeah.
Councillor
Thank you very much. Going back to Green Lanes shares, is it fair to ask if the Wilco collapse is going to have an effect on our revenues?
We've discussed this, do you want to discuss it again?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a very bad question. It was also raised recently at Policy Development Committee as well. Obviously, the Wilco now being closed obviously does have an impact on us. Obviously, all the time they're in administration, in the sense they were still responsible for their liabilities. Now that they've closed, we're in conversation with the administrators or our asset managers or practice who manage Green Lanes for us. The financial impact for us will obviously be a lot of rental. But obviously our interest is to try and get somebody into that unit as soon as possible. We hope that sooner rather than later. We're having discussions with other retailers who are interested in some of the units in Green Lanes, not just the Wilco unit, but also the FBHS unit. We're in part A, so I won't go into any information about those, and also they're contractually sensitive as well at the moment. In terms of the impact on the council budget, there will obviously be a loss of income. But one thing we did when we set the financial arrangements up for Green Lanes was we put money into a reserve for any income volatility. So if we lost a retailer through such as Wilco, the council budget would be protected. So we put £150,000 into an income volatility reserve over 2 financial years that puts an amount of money in a reserve that smooths that effect over the revenue budget. So if there is some money lost in terms of rental income, we can use that reserve to balance the budget this year to show a smooth effect on the budget. Hopefully, we'll get somebody into that unit, and then obviously the rates that are payable and the rental will then be picked up by a new tenant into that unit. So we hope to get someone in there as soon as possible.
And Councillor Jones, Councillor Rushton.
Yeah, the question's around the same point. So does that reserve come through from revenue from the shopping centre?
Yes, it does.
And appreciate you can't hold every figure in your head, but I'm just intrigued by the fact it gives us the net return 22-23 at 291. Is that an increase or decrease compared to the previous period? And are we aware what that figure was? Because I remember.
That part year.
So 22-23 was the first full year that we've had Green Lanes. We bought it in November 21.
Okay.
So we only had 4.5 months worth of net return.
Yeah.
But the net return was actually higher for 21-22, even though only 4.5 months, because we didn't have, we had minimal borrowing costs for the 4.5 months because we didn't apply any borrowing costs until the year after. So that first financial year where we had that additional money, of that money, we put 75,000 into the income volatility reserve and 170,000 into corporate property initiative reserve. So if we wanted to do additional things at Green Lanes, such as marketing, or we had a unit that became empty and we needed to white box it to make it more marketable to somebody else coming in, that reserve gives us that ability to do that. Then in 22-23, out of the 291,000, we put another 75,000 in the income volatility reserve. So the income volatility reserve had money out of the previous 2 years surpluses from Green Lanes. That 2 lots of 75,000 come to 150,000, and then the 170,000 for the corporate property initiatives reserve brings that reserve up to 320,000, which is what's in the report.
That's confident, Jonathan.
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Bushell.
I've thought over my question. I wonder whether it might be more appropriate, although linked to Green Lanes, to be in part B. Am I allowed to hold my question until then?
We haven't got a specific item on Green Lanes in part B, but obviously we are talking about the corporate risk register, so if it's associated to.
We'll find it on the risk register. Yeah,
thank you. Yeah.
Can I just ask, Chair, about the page 52, the customer satisfaction audit, the table there, with climate change at the bottom and the marking is satisfied. Can I ask what that is based on?
This, I believe, is what, when the auditors have finished their audit.
We asked for their opinion in terms of the audit team, in terms of how did this audit go? So that's what they told us after our audit.
Feedback from the officers, departments.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Right, wasn't much discussion about the audit, but that is worth discussing. Where you're showing, we've got a substantial and too reasonable.
Yeah.
And just reassuring you've got some good positive feedback from departments being audited.
Let's move.
Yeah, it's just a note. Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you, everyone with the project. And then we're on to Grant Thornton, Ross.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so hi. everyone, it's Ross.
Finally.
Yeah, hopefully I'll keep it short and sweet. So we bring to you today our audit progress report and sector update. So at the previous committee, Pete and I unfortunately gave the news that we unfortunately didn't have a team and therefore a proper plan in terms of deliverable timeframe on when we would deliver the audit. We have now been able to secure a team, and that means that the audit will be commencing next month, so on the 2nd of October, with a plan to finalise by December and bring our audit findings report and opinion to the committee in January. The same timescales are the case for our value for money. Again, we will be starting that work in October. That is undertaken by a separate central team with Andy Nichols heading up that work, but the deliverable timeframes on that are the same. The housing benefit work is in progress, and the deadline for that very much remains at the moment at November 2023. And at the moment, we are on track to be able to complete the housing benefit return by that deadline. That's the key outputs. To be honest, there's a couple of articles in there talking about the challenges that we're kind of facing as a sector as well in terms of delays, but I will take those as read, but happy to take any questions around anything in our report.
Any questions, councillors? Questions?
It's good to hear that there's a team going to be working on our stuff.
Good. Okay, it's just a note.
The sooner it's finished, the better.
Good. Thank you, Ross. So perhaps we'll look at the agenda next time. Let's see how we can move it around a bit.
Yeah.
So we can
Thank
move
you.
it around. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ross.
So it's 14. All right, this is a letter. Are we going to present this at all?
No, Chair, it sets out the stats.
Yeah.
On page 71.
Thank you.
Again, it's just for members to note.
Pat Stevenson wasn't here last time. This links to the presentation last meeting. We had to team about complaints, etc. I think the data is slightly different timescales. I think there was mention of 9 by IT. So it's probably the same data on different periods.
Yeah.
But what's really showing is there was only 2 upheld complaints. Yeah. By the ombudsman. What I'm interested to know is, I'm not sure if all of it was self-answer. Is that quite a low figure? To me, it seems. I mean, 0 would be perfect. So complaints, you know.
We could always strive for 0, Chair.
Is that close actually? But
don't know how that compares to others. I can other authority data.
no, okay.
But again, we can.
That's something to be bigger, but
I don't know whether Paul's got
No, I don't know.
other information on the other authorities.
It's reassuring to say that 100% of the
yes,
recommendations on the work with the ombudsman were carried through.
I think it wasn't the concern, because I think I'm reading the.
There would be, yes,
yeah. So that's just a note. Thank you very much. 15 is the tracker. Is that?
I can take that.
Thank you.
This is your normal tracking report. So the first page, more project just gives you the highlights in terms of those audits in terms of progress and high, medium and low risk. Appendix B, starting on page 77, this sets out those audits that have been completed since the last report. There's 19 recommendations that have been completed since the last audit report. Table C sets out those where we're asking for some short extension of time. There's a bit of detail in terms of notes in there. There are only 6 audit recommendations that we're asking for extensions of time. 4 of those are this like Christmas, 2 into 2024, 1 in February, and 1 in July, around the resident. That's all to do with the matching on the council tax system again. So again, you don't plan to go into those in any detail as members want you to. But the 4 of the recommendations, let's say, have got date extensions, short ones, one's in October, one's in November, and 2 for December. And then we've got 2 recommendations asking for a date extension to February and 1 to July 2024. And then at the back of the agenda, then you've got Appendix D, which is any of those that are overdue actions. There are none of those. And then Table E, which are those associated with the annual governance statement. This shows the majority of those being 100% complete. There is one that's 40%. That's all to do with the procurement strategy, and that procurement group has been re-established, and we have progressed that recommendation further. So that will be actually being progressed, but the remainder of them are all 100%. So it's just those asking members to approve the requests for date extensions for those 6 recommendations that were in table C.
So it looks to me that the extensions are reducing the last time number.
Certainly less than the.
So I thought that this is my last question, but I think we've taken on board our views and tried to reduce them. Councillor Shaw.
Yeah, I'm really concerned about page, got to zoom out to find out the page. 83, we have CSM and R16. This is one that I believe that we've extended a couple of times, and it's demonstrating that it would like an extension, a further extension till December, and it's only 20% complete. Now, I understand that this time last year, we also gave an extension for this project until December last year. So
is it worth discussing that under part B of the risk question?
No, guys, just that one. That obviously won't go into detail about
the
backing up the data. This one was all associated with procuring some further capital bid for our ICT team. So that capital bid was approved as part of the Q4 outturn report. That came to members in the summer of this year. That capital, once that's been approved by members in July, then ICT team have now ordered that piece of kit in terms of the backup. And that was talked about at the last meeting when ICT came along to talk about backups. So that PAG bid, which is a capital bid from the capital programme, was approved. Members approved that full council in July. Officers have actually ordered that physical equipment, but obviously ordering it in July and implementation means that obviously it wasn't going to be done for September, which is why it's now been asked to be done by December. So in a sense, the team have ordered it, the kit's coming. It's just a case down the line in the implementation to make sure we can get suppliers on board to implement that accordingly.
Bearing in mind the history of this particular risk and its high level nature, obviously the work is going to have to be done. What are the implications of us refusing this extension due to the fact that it's had a number of extensions? And to be honest, I think it's up there in the, we just want it to get done. You know, it's been, the can has been kicked. I understand that it's procedural rather than officer situation. What would happen if we just said no?
It will still get done. Members have approved the capital programme bid. So in a sense, the piece of work has been ordered, the piece of work will happen, and the piece of work will happen by December. If the data extension is refused, that won't stop the piece of work being done. So
if I not an audit partnership, how would you view it if an extension was not granted on a high risk project like this? Would it help your job as an audit person to flag things up?
Well, I suppose, I mean, from my perspective, I suppose the officers perhaps are presenting it as a fait accompli, as in the equipment, the software won't be in place until December, and that's obviously a fact. I suppose I would say the overall recommendation was you exercise your system and data restore and recovery, and you don't have to have necessarily a system software to do that. You can do that manually. You can do hard, sort of paper exercises to do that. So actually, there are other exercises you can run related to that would may be beneficial until the actual software is in place to allow you to do it in an integrated way, but, there's other approaches you can take.
And just to reassure members, we do back up our data. So data is backed up. We have a secondary centre at the house. This is actually just enhancing the kits that we back up onto.
Oh.
So it's not, we don't back up and there's a risk that we won't back up until this is done. We back up currently and have done for backups were introduced. So this is just improving the infrastructure that we back up onto and putting a better, more robust system in place. That's why we put the capital bid forwards for approval. So this will actually improve the quality of the backup. That's not to say we don't do backups already. Just want to make that clear in terms of reassuring members that this isn't something that's going to be something new. We do backup forward.
Our head of governance.
Yeah, just as an update, I was going to do it under the corporate risk register, but the equipment that we've touched on that's been ordered is actually due to be installed this week, and it may be the following week, but the idea is then that the high risk will be closed off in a number of weeks.
I see the reassurances here, but on just a real standpoint of the fact it's had so many extensions, I would like it if members didn't approve this extension because it has gone on for too long, and I think albeit maybe the fact that it's got to go to different committees has held things up, but this was hanging over us all the way through my last term as well, with extensions being asked, and there were valid reasons given for why it didn't happen, and we had a pandemic and things like that. But I think that the level of risk here, given the assurances that this will go ahead and it is ready to implement within the next couple of weeks, I think that we should take a stand and say, no, we're not going to approve this extension. The work will happen, but it's just, if things are a majorly high risk, and I personally feel that this is out of the stratosphere concerning to me because I don't understand IT. Councillor Jones, I'm sure will oppose me.
I don't know, I understand Councillor Bristol's point, but we've just been given assurance that I imagine that everyone's seeing delays across every sector when it comes to technology and equipment. And I'm sure that we can give on good faith that everything's been done, and we're hearing that everything is about to come in place. So can I still don't know how it technically works, but can I move that we agree to these extensions and we move forward on this point? And can I seek a second then?
We go to the process.
Councillor Jones is proposing, as per the recommendations, to give the extensions, and Councillor Hayward is second, is that right?
Should we just do a vote? Should we?
I just want to ask a question.
Please.
Are we allowed to redate this one?
Well, I
Are we allowed
was
to
wondering if that could be some compromise there, that it's in, if we move it a little shorter, would that be something we could consider?
I mean, obviously there's
overruns.
Yeah, and obviously the next next governance committee is November. We would hope that this is all in and ticked off by then, so it shouldn't appear on here anyway. You could put the revised date at the end of November, which would then align with when the next government.
Would that be satisfactory?
Yeah, could I ask if that could be taken on board with the proposals? Otherwise, I will raise it as an amendment.
Again, to check we're in the hands of the suppliers and the testing and the implementation. So the key thing is that the kit has been ordered. That's the government said it's been.
I'll second the amendment.
No, you just take it on board. If you're happy with it, if you're seconding, we'll
The
take
key
it.
thing is making sure that it's properly tested and implemented. What we wouldn't want to do was rush that in and not get it done properly just to hit a November deadline. The reason the officers in ICT have asked for December is to make sure that's implemented, tested properly, and that our data backups are done effectively. If obviously it doesn't get done by 31st of December, you have a governance committee very early on in January where it will then appear.
I think we've missed.
Either way, it will come up in your January.
Mr. Chair,
It's reassuring that councillor.
the proposer and the seconder have taken on board a revised date that it be done by the November meeting, whichever date.
So we're going to propose for
First,
Yeah.
that we've voted on.
As you had a proposer and seconder for the first one, we do have to take the amended one now, first.
And they've accepted to bring it into their proposal, so there isn't an amendment, they've just.
So, you know, focusing
Proposer
on,
and you did have a proposer and seconder for the first one, so you need to take the second one first.
I thought they took it, if they take it on board, it doesn't need to be tabled as an amendment. So they've taken it on board as their initial proposal, that we change
Are you happy
that.
to do that?
We're happy to do
we'll have to
that.
withdraw, we'll start again.
Do you happy to do that?
Yeah, we're not- I think it's clear, we're happy to accept this as is with the one amendment in terms of that deadline is brought forward to the next, in advance of the next meeting, if it's achievable.
Do you want me to read that?
And that's, Chair, is the piece of information that we can't give a
They're
hundred
not giving us,
percent,
oh, yeah.
because obviously ICT needs to make that assurance, but if members want to set a target to have it
We
done by.
would ask you to strive towards
Yeah.
that date. Is that,
So the official extension is that, but obviously we're saying don't go live if the officers
Absolutely.
aren't happy that it's not safe to.
and that's key to advise us
Oh, I
on
need to
this.
guess what it was,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
Did you actually decide on the date to move it to, or is it to strive to still do it as per the original, but there was a strive to do it by a particular date if possible?
Is it a week before the governance meeting in order for the paperwork to go out correctly?
The next governance meeting is the 14th of November. So what you're asking is that we have implemented it by the 14th of November.
Could we have it so the agenda could be sent, there was time to send the agenda out, so how many,
It's-
3
it's-
days?
It's very,
It's very set.
yeah. So this week before.
Okay, yeah.
Again, we would need to discuss with the ICT as to whether that's deliverable or not. If
Yeah.
it's not deliverable, then it would probably be outstanding.
Let's have a vote to see if, what are we voting on?
You're voting on the
First of all, then.
amendment first, because obviously they were happy to take on board the amendment, so you need to take a vote on that first.
And was there a date for the amendment?
Then what you're asking is that it's, well, you're asking for it to be done by the meeting on November the 14th.
Okay. And I have,
We, even if the paper's gone out, we would verbally report
Yes.
has been achieved
okay,
or not.
Does it
So-
include the word strive to? Is that-
not in the moment, we can do that one afterwards.
I think the officers will be duty bound not to roll it out if it's not ready to be rolled out, is that
Yes.
correct?
We will aim to, obviously, as the officer has said, have it implemented this week and embark on a testing program to make sure it's embedded if it's. Obviously, we will.
That is right.
Keep November, but if it's not achievable, and we certainly wouldn't go live with it until we're 100% satisfied, because that wouldn't be.
We're not IT experts, are we? At the end of the day, you know, if you wanted. And done on certain words, etc., but it's been proposed, so we're proposing
A
for
proposal and a second amendment.
amendment.
Yeah, so we voted on that first.
If I can,
Vote
I
that
will,
one first.
clear.
Chair, I don't believe that there was an amendment tabled because the proposer and the seconder of the original motion took on board that wording, so it's
Right.
now part of
You
theirs.
just need to vote on that first. You need to- So you've got the proposer and seconder of Ms. Backendage. You need to vote on that, and then
Yeah.
depending on that vote, will depend on whether you then go back to the original.
So you.
Are you happy with that? I don't withdraw it. No, there's a, yeah, that's you to vote.
If the experts are recommending, then you can't. I know IT systems always take, you should give them a
They
break.
won't implement anything unless it's ready. Guaranteed.
Right, we need to move forward on
If
this.
I can,
So,
maybe just provide some additional clarity, you have a governance committee early part of January. Which is January 9th. So the papers for that will be going out probably the last week of December.
Yeah.
Which is obviously when the state is.
I don't want councillors to vote when it gets late for the results.
If this has not been achieved by the 30th of December, it will be flagged up on that January 9th, governance committee. So the ICT team and officers have asked for December, in their professional opinion, knowing that it's being implemented this week, to give them sufficient time to implement
And test.
hardware and test it properly. We appreciate this is a recommendation that's been in for a period of time and has asked for extensions, but it's important that the officers have that time to get it in properly. We wouldn't want to rush that implementation just to make sure we can get it on next year.
I don't think that we are rushing it, because this time last year we were asked for exactly the same extension, which is why I think we should.
Chair, for the vote on councillor Bushel's, amendment.
We're just pushing it back by 1 month when we've had officer assurance that it should be implemented within a couple of weeks, and then they're just going to do testing. And
So we're going for,
We'll vote on councillor.
yeah, do we all know what we're voting for? That it's completed by the next, before the next,
November the 14th.
before November the 14th. Do we still have a closer, controversial on that?
Yeah.
Do we still have a signature on that? All four? Against? Abstain? We've got three.
Sorry, to saying.
Yes. Okay, it's going through. Good. And we thought that's all we need to go on.
I believe that's right, John, as it's been carried.
And the rest of the reports, that included the report, yes.
If members are happy,
Yeah.
yes, to the other 5 recommendations.
Other five recommendations.
Yeah, happy to close, definitely. Yes.
Councillor Bushell,
I took it to be.
the whole list.
Yeah.
Also that extension.
Good, thank you.
Thanks, just.
Now we're on to work programme. This is the note, the work programme for the year. There might change since the last meeting, I don't think, probably about the audit. But do we need to, sorry, intuition.
Do we need to add into the work programme in a part B, the discussions that we had earlier about the agency versus final point pay systems? Or are we going to have an extraordinary meeting for that?
We will report back to back. Either at the next meeting or we send that out to members.
I'll prefer to send it to members, is that right?
I think it's worth having it at the next meeting, because then we can quiz anything that we don't understand, but we're not experts in agency procurement.
But we're not looking for a report, are we? Just
What you've asked for is obviously some information around the planning salary budget as a comparable against the wider council
Yeah.
budget. And you also asked for some comparables of the rates for specific auxiliary agencies. So there's specifically some information that we will send out to members of governance committee. Obviously, that will come out to you when the next meeting happens. You've got the minutes of this meeting. If there's issues you want to raise on the back of that information that's gone out, then obviously we can ask those questions at the next meeting.
I think it'd be nice if we could have something in part B just so we can scrutinise that if we may, Mr.
It's
Chairman.
not part B information check because it's
Isn't it?
confidential.
Well, if we could
Total
actually
salary budget is-
just to.
The total salary budget is already on the council's website in the budget book, so members can find, obviously when the website's working, members can find that. But I will make sure that's sent out to
Send it out, still don't understand, email me back again.
agency comparables, will send it out to the governance committee before the next
I
meeting.
think we've lost how long, this one is half size last time and we're taking nearly this long, so. But we've gone through. Good process.
You're scrutineering.
Yes. So work programme, just to note it, is that okay?
So,
We're moving across to propose part B, please.
Propose.
And second. I would,